Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengausen. It's May 11th today, the main news at this moment. So, Ukraine claims that Putin is finally ready for real meetings because Kyiv has pushed him a bit towards this. A quote from Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, Putin himself says he's finally ready for real meetings. We pushed him a bit, and we've been ready for these meetings for a long time. So, we need to find a format. We need to end this war and reliably guarantee security. It's a fact that Ukrainian drones and missiles have a magical property of pushing towards negotiations. Especially hardcore fans of the Russian world increasingly continue to scream about victory, going to the end, everything's going according to plan. I have one control question that puts everything in its place. And does anyone remember that just 6 months ago, when everything was also going according to plan for the Russians were demanding that Ukraine give up 4 regions entirely and Crimea? Seriously, does anyone remember? They even wrote 4 of our regions into their constitution: Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, entirely, along with Zaporizhia and Kherson. And remember how Medinsky said at the negotiations, if you don't want to give up 4 regions, we'll take 6. That was just recently. And what now? Putin no longer calls Zelensky a drug addict. Now he's Mr. Zelensky to him. They took a real beating, forgot about Kherson and Zaporizhia, it seems. That was the plan. And a very telling news story about how in the West, according to Russians, everything is very bad, but they absolutely must fly there, to the West. Why? Nobody knows. For vacation, shopping, why would they vacation there? The values there are completely different from what they need. News. In Rome, the former Italian ambassador to Uzbekistan was arrested. Pier Gabriele Papadia de Bottini de Sant'Antiase. Got it on the first try, but I think I missed a bit. He, this ambassador, former was illegally selling Schengen visas to citizens of the Russian Federation. He and his accomplice Tatiana Tarakanova are accused of creating an illegal scheme for issuing Schengen visas. They organized this in the Italian embassy in Tashkent, even without the personal presence of the Russians. That is, Russian citizens, while in Russia, handed over passports through travel agencies and then received back the document already with a multi-visa pasted in. So according to the investigation, about 100 such cases have been identified. Do you know how much this service cost? From 4 to 16,000 euros. And once Russians were given this multi-visa without any special problems. And in general, nobody even talked about Russophobia in Europe. The internet in Russia wasn't cut off. Russians sold gas to Europe. There were no sanctions, no alarms. Missiles and drones didn't fly into Russia. Tuapse wasn't burning. Everything was going just fine, but someone thought it was all a bit too boring. They wanted some action. So here it is, an indelible shame in the history of the Russian Federation. 1.5 million killed and maimed, a ruined economy. That's how the Botoxed psychopath had his fun. Isolation, loss of influence on the international stage, loss of key allies in various regions. And all of this for what? Can anyone answer the question for me? What is all this for? And this, by the way, is only the beginning. Ahead, I think, lies the collapse of the Russian Federation, a severe economic crisis, internecine clan wars inside of Russia, hundreds of thousands of maniacs with PTSD whom Russians will encounter in dark underground passages. Well, who to thank for this? I think Russians already know. Here's a bit more about the economic crisis. A black swan has arrived, persistently knocking on Putin's window. Putin isn't opening the window for it just yet. For Swan Lake, one swan is not quite enough. But the others are already on their way. As they say, stay tuned. The Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation has stopped publishing budget execution reports. That's it, we're here, unpack your suitcase. The Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation was gradually classifying data, but to classify budget execution, well, that means everything is much worse, far worse than Russians imagine. Let's put it in simple terms. Why was the budget execution classified? The deficit has gone beyond all limits of decency, and military spending has finally eaten up the civilian budget. And the real state of finances now, it's simply incompatible with the official narrative on propaganda channels about a victorious economy, everything for the front, we can do it, we'll do it again. Historically, such decisions, when budget execution is classified, are made shortly before there's nothing left to hide and nothing left to cover it with. So grab your deposits, Russians, while you still can or while you have time. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We already have 507,000 on the main channel. We're fighting Putin's propaganda here, so be sure to subscribe. Let's fight it together. To international news. Two news items that are linked together. First, Iran, in response to the American proposal for a peaceful settlement, refused to dismantle its nuclear facilities, and it doesn't intend to give up enriched uranium either. This is reported by the Wall Street Journal, citing its sources. I just read the response from the so-called representatives of Iran. I don't like it. It's absolutely unacceptable to me. This is how Donald Trump has already reacted, meaning he doesn't like such an answer. But what can you do? So that's the first news item. Iran has rejected the terms proposed by the United States. And the second news, a U.S. operation in Cuba could begin in the near future. The number of American reconnaissance flights off the coast of Cuba has increased sharply. Something similar was observed ahead of American military operations in Venezuela and Iran. CNN is already reporting on this. I think, these news stories are definitely interconnected. And I think that the worse the situation gets for Donald Trump in the Middle East, the more news we'll hear about Cuba. If things don't work out with Iran soon, they could somehow freeze the situation and, in the meantime, use Cuba as a distraction. Trump's task right now is simply to shift the cameras and redirect the attention. Because of the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, well, by the way, maybe everything will be resolved in China soon, where Trump is heading, but more on that later. A very interesting agenda is shaping up there. Well, in the meantime, distracting with Cuba is exactly what's needed. A full-scale military operation against Iran? I don't think so. It's too expensive, too risky, and too unpredictable. What's needed is a small victorious war. Ideally, even a victory, but without the actual war. In Cuba, the image of a long-standing enemy has been ready for a very, very long time. Cuba is perfect in this regard. It's like an enemy with 60 years of experience, and that's actually the case. It's true. The communists simply ruined Cuba, turning it into a depressed dump, and now a serious groundwork has begun. On May 7th, the US imposed sanctions against Geisa. This is a military conglomerate that controls more than 40% of Cuba's economy, meaning corrupt military officials who own hotels, manage finances, mining, and retail trade. Everything is under the control of these corrupt military men. This conglomerate was created back in the 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the military took the economy into their own hands. So according to State Department estimates, hidden in Giza's offshore accounts is up to $20 billion. I think the US Treasury knows perfectly well where that money is located. And now the question has arisen. On one side of the scale is the money. We know where it is, and if necessary, we'll exert influence to get to it. And on the other side, make concessions to us, on the other side of the scale. We'll see which one carries more weight. But this is a serious blow. I think there are a few more surprises like this ahead. And about Trump's visit to China, China officially confirmed the visit today from May 13th to 15th, and here's the situation leading up to this meeting. The picture, frankly speaking, is not very favorable for Donald Trump. Xi has long been telling his officials that the East is rising and the West is in decline. That is, his confidence grew even stronger when in April and October of 2025, China threatened to limit supplies of rare earth metals. Trump backed down and never dared to escalate because the dependence is total. It's clear that the key topic of the negotiations will be Iran. China has already cast itself in the role of such a constant diplomatic broker in the Middle East, and now it will convert this role into concessions from Washington. They will touch upon, obviously, the topic of Ukraine. China remains the key savior of the Russian economy, as well as a supplier of necessary components and dual-use goods. By the way, it's telling that Putin is expected in Beijing as early as next week after the meeting with Trump. The Botox rat will rush to China to pay homage and at the same time to sniff out, to scout where the direction of the eastern wind is shifting. Well, Trump is going to Beijing not as a winner of a trade war, but as a president who needs help with Iran, needs rare earth metals, needs beautiful deals for the domestic electorate, and who is ready to pay with geopolitical concessions for these tactical gains. For China, this will be a different kind of exercise. It will be necessary to consolidate this image of an indispensable great power, which simultaneously holds the keys to the Iranian issue, to rare earth metals, the supply of the American military-industrial complex, and to the Russian war machine. Xi Jinping has all the levers. It's such a set very powerful levers, and Xi Jinping knows how to use them, so it will be very difficult for Trump. He basically drove himself into this situation. Meanwhile, Ukrainian warriors are showing the whole world true heroism, which will indeed enter all the world's textbooks. In every episode, we have an important fundraiser for the defense forces of Ukraine. Today, we continue the fundraiser for the first separate medical battalion. Fundraising for artificial lung ventilation machines. There is a catastrophic shortage of them now at the front. This is for forward surgical groups, and our medics have recorded a video message for you. Please take a look.
Апарат штучної вентиляції легень – не просто медичне обладнання, це шанс на порятунок та життя для пацієнта. В умовах бойових дій, де потік поранених часто є раптовим і непередбачуваним, таких апаратів потрібно дуже багато. До того ж, вони мають властивість ламатися та виходити з ладу від високого навантаження. Разом із каналом Бориса Тізенгаузена ми вже зібрали на 4 таких апарати, але цього все ще недостатньо для передових хірургічних груп нашого підрозділу. Тому ми оголошуємо збір ще на 2 апарати. Ми щиро дякуємо Борису та його глядачам за допомогу, небайдужість і увагу до питань порятунку українських захисників.
Let's help our medics, our guardian angels, who, while risking their own lives, are saving the lives of our defenders. And you know, recently Volodya wrote to me, an acquaintance of mine who is serving in a medical battalion. He wrote that every 4th artificial lung ventilation machine in the battalion is working and saving lives thanks to you. I mean, you are just incredible. I don't know, in every episode I tell you a huge thank you. The link to this fundraiser is in the description of this video. There's mono, private, and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. If you happen to be watching on another channel, there's always a QR code in the corner. It also leads to the fundraiser. Well, as for the Russians at the front, they have new problems. Some extremely important news has just come out. The armed forces have begun systematically using drones on one of the key logistical arteries of the Russian Federation in the occupied south. This is the Taganrog, Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol, Henichesk, Jankoy highway. And this will have very serious consequences for the entire Russian grouping, both in Crimea and in the south of Ukraine. It is through this route that the occupiers have for years been transferring fuel, ammunition, equipment, personnel, and supplies for their troops. Essentially, this is the main land highway that connects Russia with occupied Crimea and the southern front. And here is the most important thing. That is, this highway passes relatively not far from the front line, from 100 to 160 kilometers. And this is already a zone where our Ukrainian drones are capable of creating a serious and constant threat for the Russians. I mean, before we couldn't do this, but now we can. The Russians there, the highway in different directions, additional lanes, that's it. Now our drones reach there, cut off this highway, and the Russians have huge problems. There, Russian military correspondents are already filming videos that our drones are already working along this highway. The Russians have practically no alternative to this highway. The armed forces did a good job here. The Crimean bridge has been operating with restrictions for a long time, meaning no one allows fuel, lubricants, or flammable weapons through it. They're afraid, terribly afraid. Sea logistics in the Black Sea is very risky. The remaining ferries, the 2 that were there, were literally blown to pieces a couple of months ago. I mean, air communication is obviously limited. As a result, only this highway remains the only way. Well, logistics in war is not just trucks and gasoline, it's generally the army's ability to hold the front, transfer reserves, and maintain the pace of combat operations. And they are already starting to work along this single artery. And literally a couple of days ago, Gherkin, the one who was thrown into pretrial detention, was saying that the armed forces of Ukraine would soon land troops in Crimea. How do you think these news stories are related? And why on earth would he start talking about such things? Now, this is another news story I just couldn't ignore. It's simply the quintessence of what's happening in the Russian Federation right now. Just listen to this. Here, you know, every single phrase matters. Every sentence is a kind of unique masterpiece. The news, how a monument to Stalin was unveiled in Rostov-on-Don. In the village of Leninovan near Rostov-on-Don on May 9th, a memorial to Joseph Stalin was unveiled before a large crowd, reports the local newspaper Molot. A wall fragment with a plaque depicting Stalin was placed in a park at the initiative of the Regional Communist Party Committee and the local Berezovsky Association, funded by the people, meaning the locals actually paid for this monument themselves. And let me show it to you. There it is, such beauty. This event, as noted, was supported by the local residents. It was a solemn occasion, accompanied by a concert from a Cossack ensemble and a distribution of free pilaf. And it's reported that the children present at the celebration, listened to stories about Stalin. Can you even imagine this scene? So here they are shoveling up pilaf, a drunk Cossack ensemble is dancing away. There's a wall with a portrait of Stalin on it. Children are sitting there listening to how, Stalin shot their great-grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers. He shot their ancestors by the millions, sent them to labor camps, and yet they're putting up a monument to him. I understand that many people there are beyond help. So after the war, only a moat with robot crocodiles. We won't torture real crocodiles. A massive wall, a moat with robot crocodiles, drones circling, barbed wire, just so that all of this, Stalin, monuments, communists, Cossacks, red-faced, pot-bellied, so none of it crawls out from there. As for you, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I'm asking you, please, let's help our medics, the first Med Bat. The link for the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine.